In this video, you will learn when and how to file and pay withholding tax to the Inland Revenue Authority of Singapore, or IRAS. As a payer, you are required to file and pay withholding tax to the IRAS by the 15th of the second month from the date of payment to the non-resident. Let us go through some examples. On 1st January 20X1, Company A makes a payment to a non-resident company for the technical services it rendered in Singapore. This payment is subject to withholding tax. When must Company A file and pay the withholding tax to the IRAS? Company A has to file and pay the withholding tax to the IRAS by 15th March 20X1, which is the 15th of the second month from the date of payment to the non-resident company. In another example, Company B makes an interest payment to a non-resident company on 31st March 20X1. This payment is also subject to withholding tax. When must Company B file and pay the withholding tax to the IRAS? Yes, that's right. The due date to file and pay the withholding tax is 15th May 20X1. How do we determine the date of payment to the non-resident? The date of payment to the non-resident is defined as the earliest of the following dates. When the payment is due and payable based on an agreement or contract. In the absence of any agreement or contract, the date of the invoice will be the deemed payment date. Credit terms should be disregarded. When the payment is credited to the account of the non-resident or any other accounts designated by the non-resident. The date of actual payment. In this example, Company C entered into an agreement with a non-resident company which provides that royalties are due by the end of each calendar year. Royalties are due and payable on 31st December 20X1. However, actual payment was only made to the non-resident company 1 month later on 31st January 20X2. When is the date of payment to the non-resident company in this case? It will be 31st December 20X1, as it is the earlier of the payment due date and the actual payment date. What if the agreement did not provide when the payment is due and payable? Instead, the non-resident company issued an invoice dated 15th January 20X2 to Company C with credit terms of 60 days. Company C paid the non-resident company on 15th March 20X2. In this case, the date of payment for the purpose of withholding tax will be 15th January 20X2, which is the earlier of the invoice date and the actual payment date. For the purpose of determining the date of the invoice, the credit terms of 60 days stated on the invoice is disregarded. Once you have determined the date of payment and the due date to file and pay the withholding tax, you will need to prepare these information before you file the withholding tax to the IRAS. Particulars of the non-resident, details of the payment such as the nature of the payment, date of the payment, period of the payment, and the applicable withholding tax rate. Confirmation from the non-resident on whether the income was derived through a trade, business, profession, or vocation carried on or exercised in Singapore, and if the income is effectively connected with a permanent establishment that the non-resident has in Singapore, and its tax residency status. If the non-resident is a resident of a jurisdiction with whom Singapore has an avoidance of double taxation agreement, or DTA, you will need to submit the certificate of residence of the non-resident. You are required to file the withholding tax through the File S45 form digital service in My Tax Portal. Before filing, you need to be authorized via Corp Pass for the S45 withholding tax filing digital service in My Tax Portal. For step-by-step guidance on the filing of withholding tax, please refer to the user guide available on the IRAS website. To avoid incurring penalties as a result of late filing, we strongly encourage you to mark the payment due date or dates on your calendar. If withholding tax is not paid by the payment due date, a penalty of 5% on the tax amount will be imposed. If the withholding tax remains unpaid 30 days after the payment due date, an additional penalty of 1% per month may be imposed for every completed month that the tax remains unpaid, up to a maximum of 15% of the unpaid tax. The total withholding tax penalty is capped at 20%. Here is an example to illustrate. Company D has made a royalty payment of $50,000 to a non-resident company on 28 September 20x1. The deadline to file and pay the withholding tax of $5,000 to the IRAS is 15th November 20x1. Company D has overlooked this filing deadline and only filed and paid the withholding tax of $5,000 on 31st March 20x2. As Company D was late in filing and paying the withholding tax, it must pay the withholding tax amount and the late payment penalty fees computed as follows. For not filing and paying by 15th November 20x1, a 5% late payment penalty on the withholding tax amount of $5,000 was imposed. This worked out to be $250. Since the withholding tax remained unpaid 30 days after the imposition of the 5% late payment penalty, an additional 1% penalty was imposed for every completed month that the tax remained unpaid. This means that an additional 1% penalty was imposed for 3 completed months. This worked out to be $150. The total late payment penalty imposed was $400. If the withholding tax or late payment penalty remains unpaid, the IRAS may instruct your bank, tenant, or any third party to pay the money they hold on your behalf or due to you directly to the comptroller. The IRAS may also take legal actions for the tax outstanding. So remember to file and pay your withholding tax on time. Let's recap. Withholding tax must be filed and paid by the 15th of the second month from the date of payment to the non-resident. The date of payment to the non-resident is defined as the earliest of the following dates: when the payment is due and payable based on an agreement or contract. In the absence of an agreement or contract, the date of the invoice will be the deemed payment date. Credit terms should be disregarded. When the payment is credited to the account of the non-resident or any other accounts designated by the non-resident. The date of the actual payment. If withholding tax is not received by the due date, a 5% late payment penalty and subsequently an additional 1% penalty will be imposed for each completed month that the tax remains unpaid. You may visit the IRAS website or contact us for more information.